Night sat over the Imperial research vault like a closed fist. In the hall, a red line crawled along the floor, showing the safe path for workers. Tonight it showed prey. Jax moved in the shadows. He wore a gray coat and magnet gloves. His face looked calm, but his eyes were sharp. He told himself not to think about the dragon. He needed focus, speed, and a clean exit. Leary waited in a glass cell. Her silver eyes were clear. Her breath fogged the window and made small clouds. She did not cry. She counted her heartbeats and watched the door. Jax had promised to come back. He always kept his word, even when it hurt. The vault hummed around them. Far below, a stasis hangar held a row of tanks. The biggest tank held Ember. He was not full-grown, but he was still huge. Curved horns, folded wings, golden scales like small coins. Tubes fed him sleep. The Empire called him Asset 9. Jax did not like that name. He clipped a pulse nugget onto a power ring and pressed a button. Lights dipped. Alarms woke and began to scream. The red line on the floor broke apart like cut wire. Gates slammed. Sirens rolled through the halls in a deep wave. Jax smiled once. Now the clock had started. He ran to Leary's cell. The lock was smart, but the hinges were not. He slid a wedge under the frame and cracked it with a steel bar. The glass sighed and opened. Leary stepped out and took his hand. Her fingers felt cold. "You came," she said. "Told you," he said. They had 2 minutes before soldiers reached this level. Jax led her to the lift that went down, not up. The control wanted a code. He yanked the panel and crossed 2 wires. The car dropped fast. Leary bent her knees and breathed slow. Jax counted floors in his head. The doors opened to the stasis hangar. The air smelled like metal and frost. Rows of tanks glowed pale blue. Ember slept in the last one like a mountain behind glass. Leary walked to the tank and placed her palm on it. The glow warmed under her fingers. The glass sang, "Very soft, not now," Jax said. He unlocked the clamps on the tank cradle. He pushed the cradle onto a freight cart. Wheels squealed. From the ceiling, cameras turned. A calm voice spoke through speakers. "Return Imperial assets. Lay down." Jax flipped the camera a small goodbye. Boots pounded in the stairwell. Jax pulled a sack from his coat and shook out a fog of white foam. It spread on the floor and made it slick. The first squad slipped hard and fell. Leary held the cart steady. Jax fired a flash bead at the lights. The hangar went bright, then dark. They shoved the cart into a cargo lift. Doors closed. Bullets hit the metal and rang like bells. When the lift opened, their stolen hauler waited in a dim bay. Jax rolled the cradle up the ramp. Engines coughed to life. The ship tore free into the night. Inside the tank, a hairline crack spread. Leary heard a sound like a warm breath under ice. Ember's gold eye opened. The stolen hauler rose through black clouds, engines shaking like a tired heart. Inside the cargo bay, frost fell from the cracking pod. A thin line split the glass. Warm mist curled out. Ember's gold eye opened fully, bright like a coin in firelight. Leary stepped close. Her silver eyes were steady, but her hands shook. She pressed her palm to the crack. Heat met heat. The glass hummed back a soft song. Ember's breath fogged the inside. The scales along his neck lifted and settled again, like corn in wind. Jax strapped into the pilot chair and killed the running lights. He flew by the dull glow of old gauges. The radio hissed. A cold voice spoke. "Unmarked hauler, return Imperial property." "Cut engines. Prepare for board." Jax flipped the radio off and smiled without humor. "Not tonight." A red mark bloomed on the scanner. Then another, then 5. Fighters came in fast, like knives over water. The hauler was slow and heavy. It was not a warship. It was a bet. In the bay, the crack spread with a sharp tick. Leary pulled the emergency lever. The pod side open, all seals breaking at once. Ember slid out and landed on his claws, heavy but careful, steam rising from his skin. He was not full-grown, but he was still huge in the small bay. He lifted his head and looked at Leary. No words, only a wave of meaning, cold. "Hungry too." Leary raised both hands. "Easy," she whispered. Simple breath in, simple breath out. The dragon's pupils widened. His chest fell into the same slow rhythm. Calm passed between them like warm light under a door. The ship jolted. Blue beams cut past the viewport. Fighters had visual. Jax threw the hauler into a dive, nose down, then dragged it up hard. Metal groaned. Loose bolts rattled. He watched the old heat gauge, watched the needle climb, and he did not blink. "Hold on," he said to no one and everyone. The first fighter moved to lock. Ember felt the threat before Jack saw it. He crouched, pushed his head toward the side hatch, and growled. Leary understood. She ran with him, palms on warm scales. She hit the hatch control. Cold night rushed in. Wind screamed. Ember leaned out and breathed fire, not a full blast, only a short, bright flare. The flame washed across the fighter's nose, white-hot for a heartbeat. Its sensor eye went blind. The fighter swerved into its wingmate. Both spun away, trails of smoke like black ropes. Jax used that gap. He cut the drive to idle and opened the old coolant valves. Pale vapor poured over the hull, hiding their heat like fog hides a lake. The scanner lost them for 2 breaths. 2 breaths were enough. He aimed for deep cloud and then for empty dark. Space opened like a door. He hit the jump for a nearby moon. No port, no patrols, only dust and rock. The hauler shuddered through the small jump and fell into the moon's gray night. He set the ship down in a crater that looked like a broken bowl. Silence came back slowly. Ember stepped from the hatch to the ground, claws clicking on stone. Stars burned cold above them. Leary touched his neck. He bent his head so she could scratch an old scar between 2 scales. A thread of warmth passed through her hand, fine as silk. The bond settled deeper. Jax checked the sky with a small scope and the ground with his ears. He heard nothing but thin wind. He began to set a net of tripwires and reflectors around the crater. Human trick, simple and fast. A soft beep came from the ship's nose. Leary turned first. Ember's head snapped toward a black shape half buried in dust. A dull metal pole with a cracked lens. Jax cursed. Beacon, the lens woke. A tiny red light blinked once, twice, 3 times. Then it went steady. Far above, something old and hungry turned its face toward the moon. The beacon's red light stared at them like a single angry eye. Jax did not waste a breath. He snapped the pole free, stuffed it in a tarp, and buried it under gray dust. It did not matter. The damage was done. Inside the crater wall, he said. Cave, now. They found a slit in stone and slid into a narrow lava tube. The air felt dry and old. Phantom echoes followed each footstep as if someone walked behind them 1 step late. Ember folded his wings and crept in. His scales brushed rock and made a soft, steady rasp. Leary touched his shoulder. Heat moved from him to her like a calm hand. The dragon sent a picture in her head. A dark nest, a small flame, her voice like water. She did not hear words. She felt shape and color. She understood anyway. Stay with me, she whispered. Ember lowered his head and breathed slow. The breath smelled like warm iron and smoke. Jack set down his pack and pulled out scraps. Wire, copper mesh, a cracked dish, a roll of dull foil, 3 old batteries, and a child's wind-up toy with 1 missing wheel. He started to build. His hands were fast. His eyes were tired and bright. Signal mask, he said. Ugly, but it eats noise. He wrapped the dish in mesh and foil, then strung wire along the tube like a spider web. He grounded the lines into damp rock. He made a small box with a switch and a fuse made from pencil lead. He hummed while he worked. The tune was not happy. It was stubborn. Leary watched with quiet pride. She pressed her palm to Ember's chest and tried something new. She sent a slow wave of cool, then of warm. Ember blinked, then answered with a soft ripple under her hand. Cool meant still. Warm meant ready. They practiced until the motions felt easy, like breathing. Outside, thin wind blew over the crater. Dust hissed. Far above, faint lights crossed the sky like slow knives. Jack set a tiny radio on a rock and tuned it with a nail. A message broke through the static. Imperial notice, stolen asset. Dragon class. Accomplices. 1 human male, 1 alien female. Bounty posted. Live capture preferred. Dead acceptable. Leary's jaw set. Ember's pupils went to narrow slits. A hot spark ran under his scales. Leary stroked the scar between 2 plates. Not today, she said, soft and hard at the same time. Something clicked on stone near the cave mouth. Jax raised a hand. Silence rolled in. The click came again, slow and patient. A small shape skittered into view. It looked like a metal spider with a red eye and thin legs. Hunter drone, Jax breathed. Sniffer class. Quiet but cruel, he wound the toy. The toy chirped a broken tune and limped out, wheel scraping. The drone turned toward the sound. It took the bait. Jax touched 2 battery leads to the mesh he had laid on the floor. The wire flashed white. The drone stepped on the bright line and locked up in a stiff arch. The red eye flickered. Jax jumped and slammed the switch on his box. The pencil fuse popped. The drone fell with a burnt smell, Ember rumbled. Leary held him back with a cool pulse. Wait, safe, good. Jax crouched over the drone. A small light still blinked under its shell, deep and mean. He pried the shell open with his knife. Inside, a second light beat like a tiny heart. Transmitter, he said. Short burst. It already called home. They all looked up, even underground, as if they could see through stone. The lava tube felt smaller. The air felt tight. From far away, the ground gave a soft, low sigh. Dust lifted from the cave floor and hung in the air like breath in winter. Jax closed his eyes and counted. He did not reach 10. Ships, he said. They are coming. They left the lava tube before the dust settled. Jax packed the wire, the dish, the mesh, and the dead drone into a sack. Ember crawled out first, nose to the wind, tasting metal and storm. Leary climbed onto his shoulder and held a scale ridge like a handle. Jax jogged beside them, counting each breath. The sky stayed empty. It felt wrong, like a smile with no teeth. They reached the hauler and lifted fast. The moon fell away like a gray coin. Jax punched a short hop to a nearby rock with a thin atmosphere and one ugly town. A dust market built under patched tarps and old ship wings. Traders lived there because the Empire looked the other way until it didn't. The market smelled like hot oil, old spice, and fear. At the edge, Jax parked the hauler in a slot between two broken freighters. He threw a tarp over Ember and set a rusted frame around him. From a distance, it looked like a pile of junk. Leary kept one hand on the dragon's neck. Ember's eyes narrowed. He did not like the noise. He did not like the smell. But he stayed. An old mechanic waved them in. He had grease up to his elbows and a kind face. One eye was glass with a hairline crack across it. His name was Meru. You look like trouble, he said. We look like customers, Jax answered. Fuel, filters, a heat baffle if your luck is loud. Meru's mouth twitched. Luck here whispers. He glanced at the tarp that moved like a breathing hill. He did not ask questions. Help me with a stuck engine and I'll help you with parts. Jax nodded. He rolled up his sleeves and went to work. Human hands, human tools, pry bar, clamp, old torch. He talked to the machine like it was a friend with a bad day. The engine coughed, spat, and settled to a steady hum. Meru smiled with all his years. Leary walked the market with Ember close and covered. She saw a small girl sitting on a crate, face pale, lips cracked. The girl's mother fanned her with a rag. Fever, the woman said, eyes dull with worry. Leary knelt. May I try? The woman hesitated, then nodded. Leary lifted the tarp a little. Ember bent his head, very careful. He breathed the faintest warm breath across the girl's forehead. Not fire, not a blast. Just dragon warmth, fine as sunlight through a window. The girl's shaking slowed. Color returned to her cheeks. Her eyes opened and found Leary's face. The mother began to cry without sound. She kept saying thank you like a prayer. Whispers spread fast. Alien girl, dragon healing, eyes turned. Hope rose, and so did risk. Hope is loud. It draws hunters. A man watched from the shadow of a noodle stall. He had a clean jacket and a dirty smile. A thin line scar ran from his ear to his collar. A coin gleamed where a tooth should be. He was a smuggler named Var. He chewed a stick and weighed the numbers in his head: bounty, danger, chance. His thumb tapped a small slate in his pocket. Two Imperial scouts walked into the market with the slow steps of men who owned the ground. White masks, gray coats, shoulder crests like knives. They spoke to no one. They looked at everyone. A scanner blinked blue at their hips. Meru's cracked eye flashed. Time to go, he whispered, Jax's jaw set. He handed Meru a pouch of ration coins. For the girl. Keep it, Meru said. Spend it on speed. He shoved a crate of filters into Jax's arms. Gift, now move. Jax moved. He walked like he belonged there. Leary and Ember slid along the tarp shadows, slow and low. The scout stopped at the noodle stall. Var smiled with half his mouth and pointed behind him with a lazy thumb. Harmless. Helpful. Nothing at all. His other hand slipped the slate from his pocket and tapped send. A green dot blinked once. Far above, a quiet relay woke. Jax smelled the trap. He did not need proof. He needed smoke. Fire drill, he said softly. He snapped a flare and tossed it under a stack of oily rags. Flame leaped up, bright and hungry. Shouts rose. People ran with buckets. Sirens groaned like old bulls. The market turned into a storm of feet and dust. Under the cover of heat and panic, Jax, Leary, and Ember cut through a narrow lane. The scouts pushed into the crowd, scanners chirping, masks turning like metal hawks. They reached the hauler. Ember tore off the tarp and crouched. Leary climbed up. Jax vaulted the ramp. Engines screamed awake. As they lifted, Var watched the sky with cold eyes. The green dot on his slate turned into 3 red ones. He had sold them twice, once with a point and once with a signal. Safe haven had teeth. The hauler climbed hard. The dust market dropped behind them like a bad memory. 3 red dots turned into 3 gunships on the scope. Jax cut low power and tried to slip into shadow. For a breath it worked. Then space tore like cloth. An interdiction net unfolded ahead, a pale web of light wide as a city. The hauler hit the web and shook. Panels screamed. The ship slowed as if a giant hand held it. Var sold us twice, Jax said. His voice was flat. Blue hooks shot from the gunships and bit into the hull. The hauler spun, then steadied under a tow. Sirens wailed inside. Steel groaned. Leary held Ember's neck and felt his fear like hot wind in her chest. They did not get a choice. The gunships dragged them into the belly of a gray carrier with walls like teeth. Troopers dropped from the roof on mag lines. White masks, heavy armor, boots that stuck to metal. They moved like a door closing. Jax did not wait. He yanked a pin from the cargo ramp hinge and tossed a smoke bead. The bead cracked and thick gray fog rolled out. A trooper stumbled. Jax flicked the pin with a snap of his wrist. It pinged off a visor. The trooper cursed and fired. The bolt burned a line across a crate. Leary stepped in front of Ember with her hands up, palms out. "Stop," she said, voice steady. Ember lowered his head and tried to make himself small. A chain of shock rings hung in a soldier's grip, black and mean. Jax rushed the nearest trooper with a coil of rope and a hook. He looped an ankle, yanked, and dropped the armored man hard. He grabbed the fallen stun baton and swung. Sparks jumped. Another trooper slammed Jax in the ribs with a shield. Air left him in a long, ugly sound. Guns rose toward Ember. Leary felt the choice hit her like cold rain. "I surrender," she said. She said it loud. "Do not hurt him." She raised her hands higher and took one step away from the dragon. The troopers hesitated. That was enough. Shock rings snapped around Ember's legs and neck. He roared once, short and broken. The rings flashed and the roar died to a pained growl. Jax reached for Leary and got a cuff instead. Metal closed on his wrists. The smoke thinned. Boots filled the bay. The fight was over. They split them fast. Ember went to a cage with humming bars. Leary walked between masks, head high. Jax got a narrow cell with a bench and a dim light like a tired star. The door hissed. A tall man stepped in with the quiet of someone who owned quiet. No mask, cold eyes, gray coat with a single black bar. "Commander Slate," he said, as if the room should be honored to hear it. He looked at Leary through glass. "You are more than pretty news for smugglers, child. Your people sing fire." Leary did not answer. Slate lifted a thin slate of his own. It showed a blood mark, a spiral like a flame. Bloodline, binder. Your kind does not need crowns or wires. A cut, a touch, a breath, and a dragon listens. With training, a dragon swarm obeys. He smiled in a way that did not reach his eyes. "The Empire builds engines." "You are better than an engine. Dragons choose," Leary said. Her voice shook once, then held. "Not you." "Choice is a story the weak tell," Slate said. "You will help us write a stronger one." They took her away. In his cell, Jax lay still and listened. He counted the ship's heartbeat. 5 seconds of deep hum, 2 seconds of thin buzz. Air moved left to right. That meant a main duct behind the wall. Footsteps passed, heavy boots, then soft shoes. He noted patterns. 3 heavy, beep door. 5 heavy, no beep turn. The bench had a loose bolt. He worked it free with his cuff edge. He scratched a map on the floor. Door here, vent there, power spine beyond. The light flickered on a cycle. Every 12 minutes it dimmed for 8 counts. Cooling purge. In purge, locks ran on buffer power. Buffer power failed open if pressure spiked. He tapped the wall until a hollow ring answered. A thin grill rattled. He fed the bolt through the bars and twisted. The grill moved a finger width. Enough for a tool. Not enough for a hand. He needed a fuse. He had a spoon from the cell's slot meal. He bent it twice. He wrapped a thread from his shirt around the bolt to keep it from ringing. He waited for the purge. Far away, Ember rumbled low and lonely. Leary breathed slow to calm him, even through walls. Jax heard that too. He let the sound settle his hands. The light dimmed. 8 counts. Jack slid the spoon into the vent fan. Metal screamed, bit, and jammed. Air pressure climbed with a dry, rising hiss. Outside his door, somewhere deep, a breaker clicked. The lock on Jax's cell gave a small, sweet sigh. He smiled in the dark. He had a way out. The door slid open with a tired sigh. Jack stepped into the hall, cuffs still on, spoon hidden in his sleeve. Red strips glowed along the floor. Cameras blinked like sleepy eyes. He walked bent like a man going nowhere special. 2 troopers passed. He looked down. He became air at the corner. He knelt by a vent. He pushed the bolt through the grill and twisted. It slid enough for a wrist. He fed in a shirt thread, a wire he stole from the light, and 1 coin of ration foil. He made a loop and a knot, simple and mean. He moved again. He counted doors. He found the hum behind the wall grow loud and deep. Power spine. He smiled without joy. Inside the small utility room, he climbed a ladder into black heat. At the top sat a row of bus bars and a manual lever older than the Empire's pride. He wrapped the spoon with foil. He wedged it between 2 contacts. Sparks kissed his knuckles. He tasted metal. He did not let go. "Come on," he whispered to the ship. "Breathe wrong for me." Far away, Leary stood in a bright white room with 1 door and no windows. A thin cable ran from her cuff to a post. She felt ember across the metal like a warm star behind a wall. He was in pain. She sent a slow, cool wave. He answered with a weak glow, gold and stubborn. Commander Slate watched her with a scientist's patience. "You will prove your gift now," he said. "A small test." Nothing dramatic. Leary said nothing. She stared at the door hinge. It had 3 screws. 1 was loose. She rolled her wrist. The cuff chain made the smallest clink. The guard glanced, then looked back at Slate. People always looked at power. Ember lay in a cage with bars of humming blue. Shock rings pressed into his scales like cruel hands. He tasted the room, oil, ozone, fear. He closed his eyes until all he felt was Leary's breath. Cool, warm, ready. Jax pulled the manual lever down with both hands. The ship's heart stumbled. Lights across the corridor died. The floor shook like a held cough. Alarms tried to scream and only managed a hoarse moan. Emergency red woke with a soft click. In Leary's room, the cable to the post went slack. The guard cursed and reached for the panel. Leary moved 1 step. 1 kick, sharp and low into his knee. He folded. She ripped the cable out and swung the cuff like a weight. The edge cracked the panel. Sparks spat. The door popped open an inch. "Choice is a story the weak tell," Slate had said. Now he stood very still, eyes narrow. "Interesting," he murmured and reached for his sidearm. Leary flung the loose cuff. It hit his wrist. The shot went wild and burned a hole in the light. She dove through the half-open door and ran. Jack slid down the ladder and sprinted. He knew the carrier's bones now. Left, right, narrow hall, counting steps, hand on wall, breath in 4s. He reached the beast decks by ear, deep roars caged by quiet machines. He saw ember through bars, bright as a sunrise trapped in a jar. "Hey, big one," he said, voice soft. "Time to go." A control box sat beside the cage. Jax cracked it with the spoon and found a fat cable wrapped in black. He tore his shirt into a strip, soaked it in water from a pipe, and tied the wet cloth around the spoon to make a rough glove. He jammed the spoon across 2 studs. The cage field flickered, then fell with a sigh like a dying storm. Shock rings still bit Ember's neck and legs. Leary ran in, hair wild, eyes brighter than the alarms. She pressed her palm to Ember's jaw and sent warm like sunrise, then cool like midnight, then sharp like a drawn line. "Now," she said. Ember bared his teeth and breathed a thin, focused flame along the seam of a ring. Jax hit the metal with the spoon. The ring cracked, another. The last one fell and burned a black circle into the deck. The bay door opened. Troopers poured in, a river of white masks. Jax grabbed a chain from a hoist and pulled a big red handle. The outer doors to the hangar began to part. Thin wind rushed in. Warning horns howled. "Hold on," Jax shouted. He clipped the chain around Leary's waist and looped it through a hook on Ember's harness. He wrapped the end around his own wrist until it bit flesh. Air roared out. Loose crates flew past like angry birds. Troopers stumbled, grabbed, lost their grip, and vanished into the black. The gap widened. Stars waited. "Go," Leary said. Ember launched. They burst through the door into cold, clean space. Behind them, the carrier struggled to close its wound. Ahead, a shadow moved across the stars, so large it felt like night had shape. A dreadnought turned its iron face toward them, guns waking like dragon eyes. The dreadnought rolled out of the dark like a planet with teeth. Guns woke along its spine. Shields flared pale and cold. Jax felt his mouth go dry. He did not say run. There was nowhere to run. He watched the monster turn. He watched the glow at its edges. Cooling veins pulsed under the armor like slow blue rivers. Heat had to go somewhere. Even empires must breathe. Shadowside, he said. Veins are there. Leary nodded. Ember tucked his wings tight. They slid under the giant's belly where starlight was thin and radars were lazy. The dreadnought spun with a slow, proud roll. Jax matched that roll by eye and gut. He did not look at numbers. He listened to the hum in his bones. Closer, Leary whispered. Ember beat his wings twice, no more. He moved like a thought, not a bird. The cooling grills came into view. Long rows of dark slats with frost at the edges. Between them ran narrow seams thin as knife smiles. Jax opened his pack. Inside lay junk, a spool of wire, a bag of nails and bolts, 3 bearing balls, 2 broken magnets, and a coil slingshot he had made from a cable and a wrench handle. Big ship. Small problem, he said. Let's make it bigger. He tied the wire to the bag, clipped on the magnets, and swung the slingshot. The first throw arced across the void, slow as a falling leaf. The bag hit a grill, stuck and shook loose. Nails rattled into the vent and vanished into the ship's throat. He loaded the bearing balls. Thunk, 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 each shot dove into a different vein. A low rumble answered from deep inside the hull, like a stomach about to turn. The shield along the shadow side flickered once, twice, 5 seconds of thin skin. Now, Leary breathed. Ember drew in air until his chest shone. He exhaled a tight, bright line of fire along the seam between 2 plates. Not a roar, a cut. Metal glowed, then opened like fruit. Heat from inside met flame from outside. The vent hiccuped and spat a beam of super-hot gas back across its own armor. Alarm screamed. Doors slammed along the hull. The dreadnought's roll stumbled. Turrets twisted to find them, but the shadow side kept them blind. Again, Jax said. They ghosted to the next seam. Fire traced, metal parted, pressure jumped. The big ship tried to breathe through a broken throat. Shields arced blue, then guttered. A line of secondary blasts ran like a fuse along the cooling spine. Hold, Leary told Ember when he wanted to roar. Quiet strength. Fighters launched. Small teeth from a huge jaw. Jax snapped a small transponder from his belt. The kind smugglers used to fake cargo IDs. He taped it to a floating crate and gave it a shove. Missiles bit on the loud ghost and chased it into empty dark. Debris fielded too, Jax said. He had seen it earlier. A cloud of dead panels and rock like shattered glass. They dived. Ember tucked and spiraled between jagged sheets. The fighters tried to follow and bled wings on metal knives. One exploded without sound, only light. The dreadnought finally turned its lit side toward them, but the damage was done. Heat warnings rolled across its skin. Whole banks went to safe mode. Guns drank power and got none. The monster chose to live, not to chase. Out, Jack said, voice raw. They cleared the field and fell into a quiet lane of stars. Leary opened the hauler's narrow band and sent 10 words to the poor worlds on hidden channels. Dragons are not tools. We are not your fuel. The message ran like fire through dry grass. Behind them, Commander Slate stood on the dreadnought's bridge. He watched the small blip fade. His jaw worked once. He did not shout. He did not break things. He leaned toward the dark and spoke like a vow. Run farther, he said. I will build the road. In a silent vault deeper than fear, other pods lined a wall. Frost cracked. One golden eye, then another, then a third. The hunt was not over. It had only learned their names.